Hey children, it's Pastor Matthew here for our Children's Praise lesson. We're working through our questions here, and we've been learning about some very special words that help us to understand who God is and who we are and how He has saved us, right? So one of these words we've learned is a really big word. Maybe you can remember it. Do you think if you could say it before I say it, what would it be? I'm going to give you a second to say it out loud. What did we learn about? Justification. That's a big word. Can you say that? Justification. So we've learned that God has saved us because He justifies us. He makes us good and clean and pure. Well, now we're going to learn about another word. This is from question 34 in the Catechism. It says this: what is adoption? What is adoption? It says, adoption is the act of God's free grace by which we become His sons with all the rights and privileges that belong to us. So adoption is a free grace by which we become His sons with all the rights and privileges of being His sons, what belongs to us. So in order for us to understand adoption, you might know this one. This one's a lot easier to understand than justification. But adoption is really important because it's saying that we have been brought into God's family, that He takes us home, and He loves us and cares for us like His own son or daughter. Right? So you know something what that's like if you have a mom and dad that really love you, right? And they take care of you and they feed you and they wash you and they give you clothes, and you live with your mom and dad. They're your whole life because you are a true son or daughter. Well, adoption's just like that, except it is a little special because you weren't part of the family at one time, and then you're brought into the family later on. That's kind of what adoption's like when we look at it in Luke 15. So I just want to read this story to you so you can understand the story of the prodigal son. The prodigal son. This is a son who ran away from his family and said, I don't want to be part of this family anymore. So he actually stopped being a son. But he came back, and in a way he was adopted. He was brought back into the family. So I want you to hear this story, and I'm going to explain it to you so you really remember what this story means. So Jesus tells us a story, and He said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided the property between them. And many days later, the son gathered all that he had and took a journey very far away. He ran away from home. And there he spent all his money in a really silly way, reckless living. And when he had spent all his money and everything he had, he was left with nothing to eat except pig's food. That's disgusting. He had to eat pig's food. But then he said to himself, all the people that work for my father get to eat really good food and get to sleep and live in really nice places. And here I am hungry. So he said, you know what? I'm going to go back to my dad and say, Dad, I sinned against you. Please forgive me and let me be one of your slaves. And then as he arose, he started coming back home, and his father saw him from a really far distance away, and he picked up his long robe, and he started running to his son. And so he ran to his son, and he hugged him, and he kissed him, and his son couldn't even say anything. And then this is what the dad said. Here's a really important part I want you to see. He said, bring quickly the best robe, and put it on him, and put the ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. So I want you to see this image, right? You see the image of this dad giving his son a big hug and embracing him. That, when you see that picture, that's the picture of adoption. So I want you to always remember that picture and remember what adoption is. It's like one big hug. Can you give yourself a big hug? Right? That's kind of what adoption is, when your mom or dad come by and just give you a big hug and just make you remember that you're part of the family and that they love you. But there's 3 things that this dad did. He said, I want my son or my daughter to have a very nice robe, and I want them to have a really nice ring on their hand, and I want them to have really nice shoes on their feet, right? So that is what we call all the privileges. That's a fancy word. That's what our answer says. Adoption gives us privileges. Well, privilege is like having a really special gift just because you're your mom's son or mom's daughter, just because you're dad's son or dad's daughter, just because your parents love you that much, they give you special gifts that say, you're mine and I love you. Well, that's what these three things are. The robe, the ring, and the shoes was this dad's way of saying, you really are my son and you belong to me. Now that's what God does for us. He gives us a clean robe, so all of our sins are gone and we're dressed really nice. And he gives us a nice ring that has his image on it so that we know that we are children of God. And he gives us nice shoes so we can walk through this whole world and not get dirty, because we're actually part of God's family and we're holy and special. So now you know what adoption is. I hope that you can learn it more with your teachers and really understand what it means to trust in Jesus and be adopted into God's family.